New questions for President Trump after two women came forward saying they were undocumented immigrants while working at President Trump's New Jersey golf course.
Behind the manicured fairways and glimmering prestige of Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster lies a hidden story, one that was never meant to surface, but now it has. Two women have stepped forward, both undocumented immigrants, who once worked deep within the private inner workings of Donald Trump's luxury golf estate. And what they reveal? It's not just about immigration. It's about illusion, power, and silence. One of them is Victorina Morales. Hired in 2013, she wasn't just another housekeeper. She was entrusted with Donald Trump's most intimate spaces. She made his bed, laid out his clothes, cleaned the rooms no guest ever sees. And yet, she was warned. Don't speak. Don't be seen. Why did she stay silent for so long? And what finally pushed her to speak out? What she reveals doesn't just challenge an image. It threatens the foundation of a carefully controlled empire. Morales wasn't merely cleaning. She was performing, like backstage crew at a theatrical production, maintaining the flawless illusion of effortless luxury. From starching the collars just right to aligning Trump's toothpaste with military precision, everything had to be perfect. Because one small misstep didn't just mean correction, it meant disrupting the myth. Her supervisors, they allegedly helped her obtain false documents. Promises of raises? Broken. Her reality was built on fear and silence. Yet she kept going, because for her, this wasn't just a job. It was survival inside a system that demanded invisibility. Victorina had access that few Americans will ever know. Rooms lined with trophies, closets of white golf shirts, the stillness of power behind closed doors. But despite touching every corner of that world, she was never meant to be part of it. And here's the question that haunts the entire story. If the very foundation of luxury is built by invisible hands, what does that say about the luxury itself? At Bedminster, hierarchy wasn't just spoken, it was enforced through silence. Morales served the house but never belonged in it. Her labor was essential, but her voice was unwelcome. Her presence, while necessary, was also a threat, because it exposed a contradiction at the heart of the Trump brand. Image over authenticity, obedience over humanity. Victorina Morales lived in the shadows of American wealth, but now her story forces us to question the light it stands in. And what happens next might just redefine how we see that light. Her very presence, undocumented, unacknowledged, yet essential, was the contradiction. And in Trump's carefully staged world, that contradiction was more valuable hidden than heard. Beyond those perfectly fluffed pillows and gleaming marble floors existed a world most would never imagine. It was not just about service, it was ritual, repetition, precision, and above all, silence. Victorina Morales spent years working inside what might be the most private chamber of Donald Trump's empire, his personal residence at the Bedminster Golf Club. Here, luxury was not just lived, it was manufactured, and Morales was one of its silent architects. Her tasks may have seemed mundane: make the bed, dust the trophies, lay out the clothes. But each action brought her closer to a man obsessed with control. Control not just over how he looked, but how he was perceived, even when no one was watching. If a towel wasn't folded exactly right, if a shirt had the slightest wrinkle, it could spark irritation. Or worse, the stakes weren't cleanliness, they were perception. Morales wasn't just cleaning a room, she was preserving a myth. When Trump was present, staff were given strict instructions. Do not speak, do not look, do not exist. Undocumented workers like Morales were expected to operate like shadows, erasing their own humanity to elevate his. And yet, she saw everything. His obsession with order, his demand for spotless perfection. Even the white golf shirts, always crisp, always ready, were part of a larger performance. To the outside world, Trump was effortless power. But behind closed doors, Morales saw the cost of the illusion. Despite her proximity to one of the most powerful men in America, Morales never felt secure, never felt welcome. She was indispensable, but invisible, trusted to touch his world, but never allowed to belong in it. Who was the real Donald Trump? The charismatic figure in front of cameras, or the man who couldn't stand a misplaced towel? For Morales, the answer was found in the quiet corners, the ones the public was never meant to see. Trump's summers in Bedminster were more than weekends of golf. They were seasons of spectacle. And Morales? She played her part, silently keeping the stage immaculate, so the show could go on without interruption. But her story is not just about folded sheets or steamed shirts. It's about a larger system, one that functioned through calculated silence and quiet exploitation. Morales didn't just clean Trump's home. She exposed the machinery behind the myth. Victorina Morales wasn't hiding. She wore a uniform. She clocked in every day. But in the world she worked in, visibility was both necessary and dangerous. And that wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system. The Trump Organization's ability to maintain a spotless image, while undocumented labor powered its foundations, rested on a convenient structure of plausible deniability. Risk didn't rise up the chain, it fell downward. Supervisors handled documentation issues at the local level. Upper management, they stayed insulated. The result was a gray zone, one where illegal hiring practices could flourish just below the surface. Unspoken, but understood. This wasn't unique to Trump's company, but it was uniquely hypocritical. Because Donald Trump wasn't just a businessman. He was the face of hardline immigration enforcement. And yet, behind the scenes, workers like Morales kept his empire running. Illegally hired, knowingly kept, quietly discarded. They knew exactly who we were, Morales later said. But we were good workers, and that's all that mattered, until it didn't. Her time ran out when scrutiny began. When the public eye turned toward Bedminster, undocumented workers were fired, swiftly and without warning. The company distanced itself, and once again, plausible deniability did its job. But Morales' story reveals more than one company's contradiction. It reflects a broader American hypocrisy, where undocumented workers are vilified publicly, yet relied upon privately by the very institutions that condemn them. She and others were given tools to stay employed. False documents, fake numbers, a wink and nod system of survival. But those same tools became weapons of control. Protection and punishment, balanced just enough to keep workers compliant. The ultimate tool of power, fear. Morales' testimony, echoed by co-workers and former Trump employees, began to shatter the image of a man who championed law and order. What emerged instead was a culture of selective enforcement. Loyalty was rewarded, silence was expected, and visibility, that brought punishment. In telling her story, Morales didn't just speak about her own life. She revealed how the boundaries of legality, morality, and power had been redrawn to serve the powerful. The line wasn't just crossed. It was blurred, erased, and moved at will. What America saw in Morales' story was this. Behind the slogans, behind the policies, behind the speeches about law and order, was an empire built quietly on the backs of those it condemned. Inside Trump's Bedminster estate, fear wasn't a byproduct. It was the currency. Victorina Morales didn't just clean floors. She walked a tightrope of silence, obedience, and survival. And now, her voice, once suppressed, is reshaping the story it was once paid to hide. In the world Victorina Morales lived in, speaking up about mistreatment, unfair hours, or even a change in schedule wasn't just risky. It could mean losing your job, or worse, your place in the country. Managers at Trump's Bedminster Golf Club allegedly knew exactly who was undocumented, and in many cases they helped those workers obtain falsified documents. But this complicity wasn't protection, it was control. According to Morales, supervisors would remind her, subtly, repeatedly, how fragile her position really was. You can lose everything, they warned, and that fear was real. It worked. Workers endured long hours, verbal abuse, and inconsistent rules, not because they accepted the conditions, but because they had no choice. If they spoke out, they could lose everything. They were told to disappear when high-profile guests visited, especially when Trump was on site. Even the smallest misstep, an out-of-place towel, a wrong look, could result in harsh reprimands or termination. For undocumented workers like Morales, the wall Trump so famously promised already existed. But it wasn't made of steel or concrete. It was built from whispered threats, economic leverage, and silence. Out front, Trump portrayed himself as the champion of American workers, the enforcer of law and order. But behind the scenes, his empire quietly depended on the very people he labeled as threats to the country. Morales' story peels back that facade. Beneath the luxury, beneath the gold and gloss, was a system bound together by institutional fear. In fact, according to a 2018 New York Times investigation, some managers not only overlooked their immigration status, they actively helped forge fake Social Security numbers and green cards. Trump wasn't just turning a blind eye. His organization had baked this contradiction into its operations. It wasn't a loophole. It was part of the business model. The crisp uniforms, the elegant bathrooms, the flawless estate, all made possible by those whom the Trump campaign publicly demonized. Workers who weren't asked about their legal status because their labor was too valuable to question. Morales' daily life revealed the truth behind the slogans, that the same system calling for deportation quietly depended on those it sought to remove. This wasn't hypocrisy by accident, it was by design. For over 5 years, Victorina Morales didn't just clean Trump's rooms. She moved through them with the ever-present fear that her very presence could be turned against her in an instant. But fear alone wasn't enough. At Trump's Bedminster estate, there were other rules, ones never written down, but brutally enforced. Loyalty wasn't just encouraged, it was required. Morales quickly realized that deference, silence, and submission were the currencies that bought you safety, at least temporarily. If you followed orders without question, you might be rewarded with praise, with tips, with favorable shifts. Sometimes Trump himself would hand out crisp bills, $50, even $100. But these weren't simple acts of generosity. They were quiet contracts, payments for continued obedience. Praise in this world was never free. It was a test, and failure had consequences. Morales watched as supervisors took mental notes. Who smiled, who flattered, who disappeared when told. Staff who followed every detail to the letter were elevated. But those who asked questions, who made minor mistakes, they were punished. Morales was once scolded, harshly, for folding towels the wrong way. It didn't end with a warning. The infraction was logged, remembered, and used as leverage the next time any issue arose. Tiny missteps became weapons. This wasn't random, it was strategy. A business culture not built on consistency, but on calculated instability. No one could feel secure. A staff member who was in Trump's favor on Monday could find themselves demoted on Tuesday over a trivial mistake. Morales described it as a constant hustle, trying to stay in the good graces of a system that thrived on emotional volatility. And the message was clear. Your value was not in your humanity, but in your usefulness and compliance. Even gratitude became a tool of control. A reward dangled just close enough to keep workers reaching. Never stable, never empowered, always off balance. And this manipulation didn't happen in isolation. It mirrored a broader system, where those with power use loyalty, instability, and fear to maintain dominance over those without legal protection. While Trump condemned undocumented immigrants as criminals, invaders, and threats from national stages, Morales saw the truth from inside his home. His empire didn't just tolerate undocumented labor, it relied on it. But what hurt Morales most wasn't just the contradiction. It was how personal the betrayal became. The very house she served in, the man whose bed she made, represented a wall that was never meant to keep her out. It was built to keep her quiet. In the Trump organization, loyalty wasn't earned, it was demanded. Not through trust, but through psychological pressure, economic dependency, and emotional manipulation. And in this carefully maintained illusion, Morales found herself not just performing labor, but living inside a system that punished clarity, rewarded submission, and held instability as its sharpest tool. At Trump's Bedminster estate, a single missed button on a shirt wasn't a minor mistake. It could be the difference between receiving praise or being shown the door. This wasn't just Victorina Morales' experience. Her co-workers felt it too. Praise and punishment followed no clear rules, only a silent system where loyalty to Trump's image mattered more than skill, ethics, or effort. Morales and others quickly learned, you weren't being judged on how well you cleaned or how hard you worked. You were judged on how well you adapted to the unspoken code, silence, deference, precision. And for undocumented workers like Morales, the stakes were crushing. One small mistake didn't just risk your job, it risked your future. Then came the day Trump erupted. A small item, something as trivial as a missing hair product, had vanished from his private quarters. Trump exploded in anger. Though the outburst wasn't aimed directly at Morales, the fear that swept through the estate was immediate, total, and lasting. His temper was no secret. It was a known force, one that could be triggered by anything from a misplaced item to a lukewarm coffee. Even something as mundane as bad lighting during a photo shoot, as one former butler recalled, could unleash a storm. Morales described the atmosphere as walking a tightrope, without a net. You didn't need to do something wrong. You only had to be near when the mood shifted. That day taught her a lasting lesson. It wasn't the lost item that mattered. It was what it symbolized. In Trump's world, control was paramount, and fear was how it was maintained. Morales and others didn't clean for a man. They cleaned inside a space where their very presence could be a problem, where their existence had to be justified at every moment. And while Donald Trump ruled through noise, volatility, and public performance, his wife Melania brought a different kind of influence. Victorina Morales remembered Melania not as warm or engaging, but as watchful, silent, composed. She rarely spoke to staff, never indulged in small talk. But her stillness was not detachment, it was presence. She noticed everything, the way shirts were folded, the way toiletries were arranged, and her silence carried authority. Not loud, but unmistakable. Morales came to understand that Melania's power in the household was subtle but real. It didn't rely on fear. It relied on being seen without speaking, a force that reinforced order without a word. Between Trump's outbursts and Melania's stillness, the house in Bedminster operated under two shadows, one loud, chaotic, and unpredictable, the other silent, composed, and equally unyielding. For Morales, existing between those two forces meant living a double pressure, visible only when perfection was achieved, invisible the moment she wasn't. Victorina Morales observed that Melania rarely gave direct instructions, yet her expectations were unmistakable. Staff knew which rooms had to shine brighter when Melania was expected. They knew her standards without ever hearing her voice. Unlike Trump's firestorms, Melania's influence was cool, still, and strategic. Former Trump Tower butler, Denham, echoed this sentiment. Melania wasn't reactive, but she never forgot. Every glance, every delay, every pause was loaded with meaning. Morales came to understand. Melania didn't shout to exert control. She remembered. She observed. And in doing so, she held power without needing to display it. In a household defined by chaos, Melania's calm became its own kind of tension. Her quiet attention gave her the high ground, and a near-invisible authority that fit perfectly into Trump's obsession with image and control. Cultural observers have compared Melania's conduct to first ladies of eras past. Jackie Kennedy with her silent control over White House aesthetics, Nancy Reagan guiding policy from behind the curtain. Melania didn't govern through confrontation. She influenced through presence. Her silence became instruction, and the staff learned to interpret each glance like a spoken command. In that silence, she upheld the order and preserved the illusion. But no matter how composed the surface was, the strain underneath was growing. For over 5 years, Victorina Morales had lived in contradiction. By day, she helped preserve a world of curated perfection. By night, she went home knowing she wasn't supposed to exist in that world at all. Then came 2018. Morales made the decision that would change her life, to speak out. Alongside Sandra Diaz, another former housekeeper, she revealed to the New York Times that both had worked illegally at Trump's Bedminster Club, hired without valid documentation, and in Morales's case, sustained by a fake green card. For years, she had endured the tension of working inside Trump's private quarters, while listening to him attack immigrants like her in front of the entire nation. It was like living inside a paradox and pretending it was normal. But as Trump's rhetoric intensified, border walls, raids, mass deportations, so did her inner conflict. Morales had once hoped he'd bring positive change. She had even supported him at first, but hope gave way to disillusionment. She told the New York Times she could no longer live with the lie, that the very man condemning immigrants was profiting directly from their labor. Her work upheld the image, and that image demeaned her humanity. "We are tired of the abuse, the insults, the way he talks about us," she said, her voice finally cutting through the silence she had been forced to live in. Victorina Morales didn't come forward for fame or revenge. She came forward because silence had become complicity, because for too long her hands had helped build the illusion, while her heart bore the weight of its lie. Victorina Morales knew exactly what she was risking by coming forward: her job, her safety, even her family's future. She had seen what happened to others: quiet warnings, sudden firings, and lives erased by fear. But to her, comfort was no longer worth the silence. She wasn't motivated by politics. She turned down offers to sell her story. She didn't want a spotlight, only the truth to come out. The American public, she believed, deserved to know what was happening behind the polished walls of Trump's empire. That the president's anti-immigrant rhetoric was just that, a performance, one carefully crafted to gain power, while built on the backs of the very people he condemned. By breaking the silence, Morales gave voice to thousands of undocumented workers who had none. Her testimony added weight to investigations into the Trump organization's hiring practices. It forced a nation to reckon with uncomfortable truths, not just about Trump, but about the broader machinery of labor, image, and hypocrisy. And for Morales, it wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. She said, "We are tired of the abuse, the insults, the way he talks about us." Her decision wasn't political, it was personal. And her courage put a human face on a national conversation often reduced to numbers, slogans, and talking points. "I'm not just speaking for me," she told the New York Times. "I'm speaking for millions." In that moment, the housekeeper in the shadows became a symbol of resistance. Unwilling, maybe, but unmistakably visible. Victorina Morales gave years of labor to Trump's Bedminster estate, cleaning, scrubbing, preparing rooms for guests she'd never meet. She often worked over 60 hours a week for less than $13 an hour. No benefits, no protections, and broken promises that kept stacking. Supervisors had pledged her a raise, health coverage, safety equipment. None of it came. Behind the glossy veneer of Bedminster's elite retreats, workers like Morales were asked to do more than clean. They were asked to uphold a fantasy. VIP rooms had to appear lived in, though rarely used. Beds had to be staged, towels refolded, and uniforms perfect. Not because someone cared, but because someone might be looking. Extra hours were unpaid. Gratitude, if it came in the form of unpredictable tips. No raises, no recognition. What Morales described wasn't an isolated case. It was systemic. The resort's image depended on invisible labor. Undocumented workers, leveraged by fear, stripped of legal protections, became the hidden engine of luxury. This was not an accident. It was the model. A system that promised raises and dignity, then delivered exhaustion and silence. A structure where management minimized legal responsibility while maximizing profit from cheap, compliant workers. Morales' experience mirrors that of thousands across the U.S. According to a 2020 report by the Economic Policy Institute, undocumented workers are among the most vulnerable to wage theft and exploitation. Her story isn't the exception, it's the rule. A rule hidden behind marble lobbies, sparkling glass, and staged perfection. Trump's Bedminster estate was built to dazzle. But beneath the polish, Morales' story leaves an indelible stain. A reminder that behind every perfectly pressed sheet was a promise broken, a worker exploited, and a truth buried. Victorina Morales may have entered that house invisible. But when she walked out, she carried a story that could no longer be ignored. If this story moved you, if it challenged what you thought you knew, don't let it end here. Like this video. Leave a comment. What do you think this story says about labor, immigration, and truth? Subscribe for more human stories behind the headlines. And don't stop here. Click the next video to keep uncovering the realities hidden in plain sight.